Hello boys and girls, I'm so excited to be back with you today. My name is Casey Watts and I'm a 4th grade teacher at the Laurel Magnet School of the Arts in Laurel, Mississippi. Today we're going to be talking all about animals and how they use their senses to survive in their environments. But before we talk about animal senses, let's talk a little bit about our senses. Can you name the 5 senses? Did you say sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell? If you did, you got them all. Good job. Let's practice a little bit with our senses. What about if I take this bell and I ring it? What sense are you using? That's right. You're using your sense of sound or your hearing. What about if I take this room spray? What sense are you using? That's right. You're using your sense of smell. Smells like apples. What about if I show you this picture? What sense are you using? That's correct. You're using your sense of sight to see all of the pretty colors. What about if I take this feather and run it along my skin? What sense am I using? That's correct. I'm using my sense of touch. Gave me goosebumps. What about if I showed you this plate of cookies? What sense would you be using? That's right, we would be using sense of taste because I would want to eat them, but we'll have to save those for later. So let's check out our animal senses. First, our essential question is, how do animals sense and respond to their environments? We should be able to answer that question by the end of our lesson. Our standard is from ELA, Reading Informational Text. Explain events, procedures, ideas, or concepts in a scientific text, including what happened and why, based on specific information in the text. Before we begin our reading, let's come back and talk about some vocabulary words. Our first vocabulary word is stimulus. Can you say stimulus? Stimulus. Good job. Stimulus means to stimulate or to cause something to happen. Let's look at our next word. Response. Can you say response? Response. Good job. Stimulus and response are scientific words that scientists use to explain causes and effects, or what happened and why in nature. So we'll be talking a lot about what happened and why, or stimuluses and response, or causes and effects. No matter which way you say it, it's explaining what's happening in nature with animal senses today. Let's look at our next 2 words. Voluntary. Can you say voluntary? Voluntary. Good job. Voluntary means to volunteer to do something. You choose to do it. Our next word is involuntary. Say involuntary. Involuntary. Good job. Now, what do you notice about involuntary compared to voluntary? That's right. It has a prefix on the front. That prefix is in. Do you know what that prefix means? Yes. In means not. So involuntary is not voluntary, or I don't choose to do it. It's something that happens automatically. We'll read more about these in our text. Let's begin reading. Non-human animals have structures that allow them to see and hear things that exist around them. The brain processes the information sent from the eyes and ears. An animal uses this information to decide how to respond to the sights and sounds. Sights or sounds can cause an animal to respond. Each is a stimulus. There we see our vocabulary word. A stimulus is an object or event that causes a response. A stimulus may cause a voluntary response. This is when the animal chooses its response to the stimulus. Think about an animal that senses a nearby predator. It may decide to run, but it could decide to hide instead. Animals have many responses that are involuntary. This is a behavior that is automatic and done without thought. For example, if something is moving quickly towards an animal's eye, The animal may close its eye or lower its head in response without even thinking about it. Let's look at this example of a cat in the winter. In the winter, many cats' fur grows thicker. Shorter days signal the coming of winter. This is the stimulus, or the cause. The thicker hair is a response, or the effect, to help keep the animal warm. Now think about that. Do you think that that was a voluntary or involuntary response when the animal's hair grows thicker? That's right, that would be an involuntary response. He can't choose for his hair to grow, can he? So boys and girls, as we're reading about different animals today, I want you to think about stimulus, response, voluntary, and involuntary as we read. Also think about what's happening and why is it happening to these animals. Before we read our first animal, let's talk about the sense of sight, since we'll be focusing on that sense first. What structure supports this sense? That's correct. Your eyes support the sense of sight. So as we're reading about our animals, make sure that you're thinking about how they use their eyes. Let's read about our first animal. Which animal do you think has the best eyesight? Maybe a wolf? An owl? A cat comes to mind. It's actually the eagle. Notice his large eyes in his head. They're actually as large as a human's, even though their bodies are much smaller than ours. Let's read about him. Have you ever heard the term eagle eye? It is used to describe someone who can spot things easily. Eagles have amazing eyesight compared to most other animals. Their eyes are large. They can also look forward and sideways at the same time. Eagles can see prey, such as a rabbit, from up to 3 miles away. Owls are another type of bird with large eyes. These eyes help them to see to capture prey at night. Before we move on, do you see some evidence that tells us what happens and why it happens in this paragraph? Yes. We see that the eagles have amazing eyesight and their eyes are large, and because of that, they're able to see 3 miles away and capture their prey. Some animals have poor eyesight. They must rely on other senses to sense their surroundings. Bats hunt at night. They have tiny eyes, so they cannot see their prey well. Instead, they send out a series of shrill squeals. These sounds bounce off objects. When the sound returns to the bat's ears, the bats interpret the sound or figure it out. In this way, the bat can tell the size and distance of an object. It can also tell whether an object is moving or still. Pretty amazing. So what was this paragraph mostly about? What's happening and why? That's correct. It's mostly about animals that have poor eyesight and how they have to rely on other senses. Before we move on to sound, let's talk about why this sense is important to an animal's survival. Why was sight important to the animals? That's correct. They have to find food and avoid their predators. That's why it's important to them. Now let's move on to our sense of sound. What structure supports the sense of sound? Yes, our ears support our sense of sound. Let's read about animals with a sense of sound. Which animal do you think has the best hearing? Maybe an elephant. I know they have really large ears. Let's see. It's actually the greater wax moth. I would have never guessed that. Let's read about him. Most animals hear like you do. They detect sound waves. Like you, they have ears to listen out for sounds. Some animals can detect sounds that we can't hear. The greater wax moth can hear sounds nearly 15 times higher pitched than sounds humans can hear. With such sensitive hearing, the moth is better able to avoid predators. The moth's main predators are bats. A bat's call is very high-pitched. This sound is beyond the hearing of most animals, but the greater wax moth can hear the bat's call. The sound acts as a warning to the moth. So what's happening and why is it happening here? Yes, that's correct. The greater wax moth can hear sounds much higher pitched than we can hear, and because of that, they're able to avoid predators like the bat that have a high-pitched voice. Before we go on to our sense of smell, let's talk about the sense of sound. We said that ears are a structure that helps support the sense of sound. Why is this sense important to an animal's survival? That's correct. It can help them to find other animals, like the moth was finding the bat, and it helps them to avoid danger. Good job. Before we go to the sense of smell, what structure helps to support this? That's right, your nose. So let's see how an animal uses their nose to help them survive. Which animal do you think has the best sense of smell? Maybe a lion. They have to track their animals. Or I think again of an elephant with their long nose. Let's see. It's actually a bear. I would have never thought that. Bears have one of the keenest senses of smell of all land animals. The area inside the bear's nose is up to 100 times larger than a human's. Because of this, bears can smell prey from miles away. Because of this keen sense of smell, bears are able to locate food even though it's far away. What evidence supports what's happening and why it's happening in this text? That's correct. The bear's smell is 100 times larger than his nose, is 100 times larger than a human's. And because of this, they can smell prey from miles away and locate their food. So let's look back now at another animal before we move on. We have a bonus animal about smell. So the bears have the keenest smell. They can smell the best. But this is an animal that has the most unique way to smell. What do you think that might be? It's the snake. Where most animals use their nose, what do you think he might use? Yes, his tongue that we see sticking out in the picture. Snakes are unusual because they smell with their tongues. Look at a snake moving. You can see it flick out its tongue. The tongue picks up scent particles nearby. The snake uses organs inside its mouth to detect the scents. Snakes have poor eyesight and hearing. Instead, they rely on their sense of smell. Their sense of smell is how they find and avoid predators. What's important in this text? That's correct, that they find food and avoid predators with their sense of smell with their tongues instead of a nose like other animals. And this is because they have poor eyesight and hearing, so they have to rely on their other senses. Let's look back at our chart. So we know that most animals use their nose, but we now know that some animals, like the snake, use their tongue for their sense of smell. Why is this important to an animal's survival? Yes, we read that they had to find food and identify their surroundings. Good job. Before we go to our sense of touch, what structure helps us with our sense of touch? Yes, the skin. Let's see how animals use their skin to survive. Which animal do you think has the most unique sense of touch? It's a spider. Notice in the picture, if you look really closely, you can see small hair-like structures. This is important to their sense of touch. Some animals have a strong sense of touch that they can detect vibrations. For example, spiders have special structures on their legs and bodies. These tiny slits and hair-like spines pick up vibrations on the spider's web or other surfaces. A spider responds when its web vibrates. A spider uses this sense to know when its web has caught prey. The spider can even figure out the kind of prey just from the vibrations. The type of vibration can also tell the spider if a predator looking for food finds its web. Humans do not have nearly the sense of touch that spiders have. So let's look back. What was important here? Yes, that the web vibrates, and that's how the spider is able to catch his prey. So let's talk about this sense of taste. We saw that, the sense of touch. We saw that we use the sense of, with the sense of touch, we use our skin. How do animals use this to survive? That's right. They sense changes in their environment. The spider sensed changes in his web, but some animals might sense other changes, such as temperature in their environments. Our last sense of touch is the sense, our last sense of that we're going to talk about with animals is the sense of taste. What structure do we use with the sense of taste? That's right, we use our tongue. Let's see how animals use this to survive. Most animals can taste things in their environment. This helps them to know which foods to eat or not to eat to help them stay safe and healthy. Humans have taste buds on their tongue. Other animals have taste buds in different parts of their bodies. Which animal do you think has the most taste buds? You might be surprised. It's a catfish. We see those here a lot in Mississippi, depending on where you live. Now, why do you think they call this a catfish? That's right, because he has whiskers like a cat. The animal with the strongest sense of taste may be the catfish. While humans may have 10,000 taste buds, catfish can have up to 175,000, depending on how big they get. What enables them to have so many taste buds? The taste buds do not appear in the catfish's mouth, but rather all over its body. Most of those buds, however, are located in the catfish's whiskers, which are near its mouth. Because of the number of taste buds they have, catfish can use their sense of taste to find prey. Catfish are bottom dwellers, which means that they usually live on the floors of rivers, ponds, and lakes. This area is often very dark. While catfish do have eyes, they use their sense of taste to locate food. What is important that we learned here about a catfish with what happened and why it's happening? That's right. The number of taste buds was very important here. That's what allowed the catfish to be able to find its prey and locate its food. Let's go back to our chart. So we know that we use our tongue, or most of us do, to sense taste. But the catfish used his whiskers, and he had taste buds all over his body, not just his tongue. So why is this important to the animal's survival? That's right. He could identify food that is safe to eat. So now, boys and girls, we have learned all about animals and how they use their senses of sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste in order to survive. Let's go back to our vocabulary words of stimulus and response. And let's look at a few examples before we leave today of some more animals and how they respond to things in their environment. Let's look at this first example. A bird hears a dog barking and flies away. What do you think is the stimulus in this example? That's correct. The dog is barking. What is the response? Yes, the bird flies away. Good job. Let's look at one more. A camel tastes the water at a watering hole to see if it is clean. The camel drinks the water. What the stimulus here? Yes, first the camel has to taste the water to see if it's safe. And then what is his response? That's right. He knows it is safe, so he drinks the water. Well, boys and girls, I've had a great time learning about animal senses with you today. We've learned about stimulus, response, and how that's like cause and effect, and then voluntary and involuntary responses. Voluntary is animals choose to do it, and involuntary, they do not. And we've used all of our senses. We've learned how animals survive. You've done a great job. I can't wait to see you next time. All rights and credits for the use of this lesson come from Core Knowledge Science. We would like to thank MPB for providing these valuable resources for us today. See you next time.